It's the middle of the night in Boston. The streets are quiet after a day full of St. Patrick's Day celebrations. At the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, two men dressed as police officers knock on the door. They claim they are there to check on a disturbance, but what happens next becomes one of the biggest mysteries in art history. These men walk out with 13 pieces of priceless art worth over $500 million, leaving behind confused guards and empty frames. Decades later, the mystery of this heist still hasn't been solved. But there is something about this museum that makes it unique and played a big part in the theft. The museum was founded by Isabella Stewart Gardner, who was born in 1840 and spent her life collecting beautiful things like paintings, sculptures, rare books and furniture. She wanted to share these treasures with the world. But Isabella didn't just want a plain building for her collection. She wanted much more. She designed the museum to look like a 15th century Venetian palace, and it was made so well that the rooms really feel like time capsules, taking visitors back in time.
You think Jurassic Park was bad? Try minimum wage.
But unfortunately, Isabella died in 1924 and she left a strict rule in her will. Nothing in the museum could be changed. So, what did it mean exactly? Paintings, furniture and even the smallest decoration had to stay exactly where she had placed them. But this rule came with a problem. Two problems. Over the years, as security technology improved, it was nearly impossible to add modern systems to the museum without changing how it looked. There wasn't much space for cameras or high-tech alarms that could blend in without ruining the historical feel. Actually, the museum's security relied mostly on guards and a simple alarm system. Also, the guards weren't highly trained and they worked long hours, often alone. In fact, the alarms were basic and mostly focused on the building's door and windows. These systems might have prevented someone breaking in on impulse, but it couldn't prevent a well-planned robbery. And additionally, money was also an issue. The museum didn't have a lot of funds to spend on the latest security tools. Combining this with Isabella's strict rules made it hard to improve safety. And in the end, these problems played a big role in making the museum an easy target for one of the most famous art heists in history. In March 18, 1990, the night before Boston had been alive with St. Patrick's Day celebrations, while most people were asleep, or still partying, the heist happened.
Fuck!
At around 1:24 AM, the museum bell rang. Who the fuck is that? Two men dressed as Boston police officers stood at the door. The fuck is going on, seriously? Said Rick, who was a guard. But not just a simple guard. He was a guard of the museum. Good evening. Or morning. Or whatever. We just got a call from the museum, so we came to have a look around. But who the fuck called you? Because it wasn't me. Well, somebody did. And if you don't let us in, then you will look sus. Then come in, I guess. Now, Rick seriously fucked up here. He wasn't supposed to let anyone in unless he called the real police first. But since the police were already there, or so he thought, he let them in. Once they were in, the fake cops acted fast. They told Rick that he was under arrest. They handcuffed him, tied him up and locked him in the basement. But luckily for the museum, at that night there was another guard called Joe. They did the same to him as well. The museum was empty and the place was free for the thieves. They had planned everything perfectly. Once the guards were out of the way, the thieves had an entire night to steal the artwork and escape before the rest of the stuff arrived in the morning. The thieves started the job and it seemed like that they didn't just grab random pieces. They targeted specific artworks, some of which were the most valuable in the museum. They took the Concert by Vermeer, a stunning painting which worth around $250 million, Storm on the Sea of Galilee by Rembrandt, worth around $100 million, another Rembrandt painting, A Lady and Gentleman in Black, a tiny self-portrait etching by Rembrandt,
Chez Tortoni by Manet,
a portrait of a man in a cafe, 5 small sketches by Edgar Degas. Bonjour, monsieur. a bronze vessel, and a Napoleonic eagle finial. And for everyone's surprise, the thieves used knives to cut some of the paintings from their frames, which really horrified art experts, because cutting a canvas can cause long-term damage and it can making restoration incredibly difficult. Curiously, the thieves ignored other valuable pieces, including works by Michelangelo and Titian, and it raised the question. Why? Seriously, did they know what they were taking? Or were they just picking pieces they thought looked valuable? I don't know. At 2:45 am, 81 minutes after the break-in, the thieves left the museum with their loot. Despite the pressure of stealing priceless artwork, they worked with surprising calm and precision. The thieves avoided triggering alarms and made sure not to leave any obvious clues behind. They moved quickly and efficiently. They wiped down every surface they touched and avoided unnecessary mess. And even though they had cut paintings from their frames, they were careful not to leave fingerprints or other traces that could link them to the crime. It was as if they had planned every step to make sure there would be no clues left to help the police catch them. The only sign that they had been there were the empty frames and the stolen masterpieces. The next morning, when other staff members arrived, they found the guards tied up in the basement. The museum was in chaos. Empty frames hung on the walls where paintings once were. The room where the masterpieces once stood was now spookily silent. The walls were disturbing, as if the artwork had been simply disappeared into nothingness. When the police arrived, I mean the real police, they immediately saw how big this case was. Art thefts like this don't happen every day, especially not on this scale. The case was so big that the FBI was called in to lead the investigation. The first question was, "Team, what do you think? Who could have pulled this off?" Well, the thieves were clearly prepared. They knew how to avoid the museum's motion detectors, and they worked quickly. I think we have three main theories here.
Número 1.
Some believe that the robbery was linked to the Irish Mafia in Boston. At the time, the Mafia was a powerful force in the city, and the theft of art could have been a way to finance their operations.
Número 2.
Suspicion fell on Rick, the guard who led the thieves in. He had a history of bending the rules at work, but no solid evidence ever tied him to the crime.
Número 3.
They were just amateur thieves. The way the paintings were handled, cutting them out of frames, suggested the thieves weren't art experts. But despite the FBI launched a big investigation and interviewed hundreds of people, they didn't find any solid leads and nothing really happened for about 2 decades. But let's jump to 2013. In 2013, the FBI announced that they believed they had identified the 2 thieves, 2 men connected to a New England crime ring. But there was a small issue. Both suspects were dead by the time this information came to light. The artworks still were not found. But again, 2 years later, in 2015, the FBI searched a Connecticut home in the hope of finding missing artifacts, from where, once again, they came up empty-handed. Warehouses, homes, and even old cars have been searched, but to this day, the stolen art has not been found. After the heist, the museum decided to leave the empty frames on the walls. These frames serve as a reminder of what was lost and a symbol of hope that the art will one day return. Meanwhile, the museum offered a $10 million reward for information leading to the recovery of the stolen pieces, but even with this huge reward, the case remained cold.